Me to go?
Greetings, everyone. It is the 15th of October, and we're delighted to have you join the People-Centered Internet Community Forum today. Kevin Clark here, and our guest is Linda Bernard. Linda is the COO and Chief Learning Officer of UltiSim and shepherds QuestSim as a capability in learning for young people. I know that we regularly hear about young people from Mark Prensky, who's on with us, but we have a different perspective today. I also want to welcome Richard Boyd, who is the CEO of UltiSim. He's glad to have you here supporting your cause. All right. I'm sure you'll have some commentary, but with that, all right, let's hear from Linda and 3D adventure learning. Linda, that seems like a mashup of some familiar and unfamiliar territory. So unpack it for us. What does 3D adventure learning mean for young people? Over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Yes, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And I will endeavor to unpack this huge thing for you. So I am going to share my screen right now. And slideshow. Here we are. So we find ourselves in what Richard Boyd has coined the simulation century. And as we navigate, and I'm going to explain what that means in a second, but as we navigate education now in this new age, we really need to start thinking about a variety of different things. So what is this new age? Where did it come from? And why are we calling it the simulation century? Well, the new age really started right after COVID, when we discovered that learning didn't just need to happen in brick and mortar schools. I mean, some people already knew that, but it became a more widespread idea that education could happen anywhere and through the internet. That during COVID, teachers needed to figure out a way to get lessons and learning to their students in, let's be honest, not an incredibly effective way, but that was because, it all had to happen overnight. But we've had time to figure this out and to think about ways in which this new technology can help bring better learning for all students all over the world. The question then became, well, how do we make it better? Do we need to make it better? And then AI happened, which really, thankfully, has turned education on its head. I say thankfully. There are many teachers out there who are very angry about AI and want to block it. And I have got many friends who I've spoken to at length who could think that they are blocking AI from their classroom. Proudly, they announce this. And I mean, we know that this is absurd. There's no way to block AI. It has completely revolutionized how we see information and what we do with that information. And therefore, we should be teaching our children how to use that as a new tool. Is it a tool, though? And this is the other question. It's not as simple as that. It has become something more than a tool to us. So that is where the simulation century comes from. This is a simulation of knowledge, understanding, information, humans and machine. And so as we begin to think about how that has evolved over time, I remember certainly running into a library with great excitement and smelling the wonderful smells in a library and feeling the books and looking on the shelves and finding a book that I'm going to be super excited about reading and sitting down right there, opening it up and reading the book, right? I remember that. I remember being in university thinking, oh, I've got to write this research paper. Let's go and find all the information and pulling out these great tomes of of information, right? And sitting at the desk, wading my way through it. And going into a lecture the next day and thinking, I must remember everything that I read the other day. I've got to find a way to show that I understand this content. And therefore I'm going to regurgitate what I've heard, what I've read, all that information I've gathered. And maybe, I'll have one up on the person who's sitting next to me who didn't find that same book. And it's moved now to, it moved on to curation of the information. So instead, when we were now starting to use the internet, we realized that all of this information is now stored inside this wonderful thing called the internet. And we can have access to all of it. All the libraries in the world can be on my computer, on my phone. And I can just Google what I want to find out, and I will get a whole lot of information. But with that, as teachers, we learned came a lot of other issues. We've had to teach students how to discern that content, how to figure out that what they were reading was real or not real, how to really make sure that they understood where the sources were and to verify their sources. And from that came a whole lot of new ways to teach, which I consider better and augmented our curriculum. Now we find ourselves as information synthesizers. Instead of just Googling something on the internet to find out about it, we can do that, of course we can. But then now actually we can go to a chat bot, an AI engine, like for example, one that I love is Claude. I can go there and I can say, hey, Claude, tell me about insert whatever you want there, right? And I get a lot of information back. I still need to decide whether it's true or not. I still need to fact check. I still need to get the sources. I still want to make sure that I'm using that information to make something new, right? But I feel like I am standing on the shoulders of this, as Kevin has said, collective intelligence. And to me, that is a game changer. We are now at a point where students are able to literally stand on the shoulders of all of this incredible research and work that has been done in every single field you could imagine that is now just available to them. Why wouldn't we want them to use that and build on it and create something new, create something meaningful from it that is theirs, but start from a different place? You're not starting from that encyclopedia anymore. You're starting from a much, much stronger place that really is part of a collective intelligence foundation. So what is AI's role in all of this? And how do we make sure that in education, we are really building on our previous curriculum and making sure that we're making it stronger, making sure that we're enabling education across the world, making sure that students are going to benefit from this, and making sure that we're preparing students for their futures. A future we hear so often we really don't understand yet. How do we make sure we're doing that? And there are a lot of very driven people doing a lot of work to ensure that AI is being policed, that we have rules in place, that we have ways that we can keep track of what we're asking AI to do and how advanced it can be in education, how much AI we're allowing into education. And different countries, different areas of the world have done different work on this. The EU has done an awful lot of work on rules associated with AI in education. And I would urge you to have a look at the work that the UN is doing. And UNESCO just published, they published several information booklets on it, but they are really doing incredible work. And I know that the US is also starting to do work about it. So you see here the current state of education. We do have a little bit of a mismatch at the moment. We've got kids that are in class trying to learn, but there is a lot of difference in the way that they are expected to interpret information. So when they go home, a lot of kids either have an iPad or a computer, and they are not just gaming. I think we use a very broad brush when we say, oh, you know, all kids go home and game. Yes, some of them do, and a lot of them do, right? But in addition to doing that gaming, they're also learning new ways to communicate with each other, to gain that information that they need to be successful in their worlds. And that's at odds with a lot of classrooms in this current state of education. The way in which they are absorbing information in a classroom in some cases is still on a whiteboard, or they're still processing information in a very sit back and listen way, a lecture. Whereas what they really need to be doing is immersing themselves in the world of education that they are trying to understand, and synthesizing that new world and that new realm of possibilities with what is happening in their heads. So we know that we have a roadmap possibility here. We know that AI and teachers can help together to give students a roadmap forward that is individualized. One of the wonderful things about AI and all the possibilities it brings is that teachers no longer have to rely on teaching to the middle of the class. You won't often hear a teacher admit this, but in my 23 years of teaching and administrating, realistically, that is what happens. If you have a class of 30 students to 40 students, you don't have time in a 40-minute lesson, 45-minute lesson, to get to every single student, to make sure that every single student has understood the concept that you've taught. What you do is you teach to the middle, and then you support the base and you extend the top. And the supporting of the base is always something that is either you can spend time with that group of students after school or a break or recess or whatever, right? Or you can give them some extra work that they can do at home, which then causes some work for parents. And the same with the extension. You're giving extension work to students, which in a lot of instances, unfortunately, ends up being busy work and not true extension, not truly inspiring them. With this opportunity of AI, we have a way that we can individualize that learning, deliver the learning just in time to each individual student when they need it and in the way that they need it. We have a way for them to prove that they've understood concepts without having to go through the teacher. The teacher is still vital. I am a firm believer in teachers. I don't think we can't say no teachers, we're just doing AI. Well, I mean, we can, but I don't think that's a very good idea. I think that we should look at AI as like the angel on the shoulder of every student, kind of pushing them in the right direction. I have a little video here that I want to play of a particular game that we created a while ago for North Carolina public schools. It was about creating a character, actually.
Gather round.
Can you hear
Today,
it?
I invite you to enter the realm of pixels, polygons, and play, the magical world of game design. Picture this, a dimly lit room, the glow of screens reflecting in eager eyes. We're not just players, we are architects of alternate realities. So let's dissect the essence of what makes a game tick, the secret sauce that turns mere code into captivating adventures. Let us begin.
So that's an example of how a teacher can now introduce a lesson. Maybe they don't want to give that particular clip to everybody, right? Maybe that's the secret sauce that you're going to add at the end for the students that are going to finish early. Whatever the case, though, there are ways that we can make the content come alive much more quickly and easily. for each student. All right, where am I? I'm going the wrong way.
Gather round.
Oh,
Today,
okay. So talking about the different kinds of learning. So we had traditional learning, where we had very clear roles of what instructors did and what students did. And now we're into the world of adaptive learning, where those roles are the lines are blurred. Instructors, you would have heard that expression, sage on the stage. Now they're guide on the side. A lot of teachers don't agree with that. But we do all need to come up with a way forward. And when I say we, I mean teachers and educationists and people interested in education and the way that we can really help children all over the world. We have to figure out a way to make this learning available to everybody, accessible to everybody. And by everybody, I don't mean the middle, I mean individuals. So that brings us to QuestSim. So that was the thinking that went into, okay, what do we do? Let's fix this, right? So QuestSim was born to fix it. We believe that the products that we create are immersive 3D adventure learning games that support learning. The reason we have done it this way is because we really want to bridge the gap between the excitement that a student may experience in their home life when they go home and play a game or are interacting with their friends online, and their normal classroom experience. So in our games, there are a lot of opportunities to truly immerse themselves in what they are doing. Here is an example. Now, in this last screen, you would have seen it saying that every game is available on a browser. That's because every game that we create is delivered is a browser-based game. So all of our games, you just need a login, and there they are, open for you, ready for you to experience. Our games are, and we use the word games because we are standing behind that. There are a lot of teachers like, oh, games, you can't have games in the classroom. You jolly well can. And I think that's part of it, is we are trying to bring the fun back into learning and really helping students understand that learning is something that you want to do. You want to be at school. You want to do this work. You want to see what you can be. And creating that is something that we feel very passionately about. So you see on the screen the Story Quest Berlin Wall. This was a game that we created about the fall of the Berlin Wall, where students are learning to be journalists. And they're pretending that they are a journalist from America, and they have traveled to Berlin, and they're going to interview 10 different characters, wide, diverse group of characters from both East and West Berlin, different age groups. And as they interview the characters, they are learning more about the story of the Berlin Wall and the events that unfolded, as well as learning how to interact with humans, even though these are avatars. But it does give them practice on how to talk to people. We have a little emotion scale at the base of it that shows how well you're doing with your conversation. Are you winning them over or not? Was your question appropriate or not? And all the while, you're gathering information for your post that you're writing on the fall of the Berlin Wall. We also have Hero's Journey, Odysseus, and you saw some of the pictures of his incredible palace at Ithaca. And this Hero's Journey is really, the point of this game is to teach students about the structure of the hero's journey so that they can use that structure to create stories of their own. But they're also going into the story itself and meeting all of the incredible characters and trying to find their way out of the caves and off the island of Circe and other such events that occur that is truly an adventure. And then in Pythagoras, we have, of course, Pythagoras teaching Pythagoras' theorem in ancient Greece, and students get to go into his school of math on the hillside overlooking the beautiful ocean and discuss this concept with him and learn step by step how Pythagoras came up with his theorem. We also have this other game that we created for Spark NC Team Lab, which was specifically geared towards helping students understand how to ask good questions. So they have many opportunities. There are 3 different characters that they can choose from, and many opportunities to ask questions about a lot of different topics and learn how to ask good questions and how to practice interviews and things like that, which I think does actually need to be intentionally taught these days. We have a game called In the Footsteps of Ibn Battuta, where we follow his journey from Fez to Benin through the Sahara Desert and many other wonderful environments that students probably haven't experienced. And by immersing themselves in this game, they get a chance to somewhat experience that kind of environment and what would have happened for him. We have In the Footsteps of Matthew Henson, which Matthew Henson was an African-American man who actually was the first man to the North Pole, but was not recognized because he was African-American. Admiral Peary was recognized instead. But he actually, Matthew Henson, was the person that went out in front and got there first. And one of the unintended consequences of doing this game about Matthew Henson was that we discovered that while we were doing this, we wanted some of the dialect, the Inuit people dialect. Well, there's many different areas where he was in his voyage and many different dialects along the way. And these dialects are actually dying. In one instance, there were only 600 people speaking a particular dialect of the Inuit language. And so we've captured that in our game, which, how exciting is that, right? So you've got children all over the world listening to this language, this dying language, and maybe we're going to help keep it alive. And I think there are lots of unintended consequences like this that really make this so worthwhile. These are 2 of the games that we have coming soon. Dino Terrarium, which I know Richard is super excited about, dinosaur people, and Chemistry Quest, which is one I'm very excited about. Both of these are episodic. So as our artist told me just now, there are 2 new dinosaurs that have just been found, and we can take advantage of the fact that we are a WebGL based game company and that we can publish updates and we can publish new episodes when something like that happens. And we can get our artists to make these new dinosaurs and have them appear inside of our game. And the same with Chemistry Quest. You know, the idea is that every couple of weeks we would publish a new episode with a new experiment that students can try. The whole point behind this, though, is that we are trying to democratize education. We want to make sure that there are high quality learning experiences available to every student everywhere, regardless of zip code, regardless of who they are and what their backstory is. They should have the opportunity to have dreams and learn what they need to make those things a reality. How do we do that, right? How do we do that? And that's where there are a lot of different aspects of what we're doing that we need to prioritize. Things like teamwork. You see some pictures on the screen here, collaboration. Those are important skills that we want our students to know before they leave school. We also want them to be resilient, and we want to teach resiliency. And how better to teach resiliency than in a game environment where perhaps they don't win first, perhaps they do fall down, but they get back up and try again. And they can do that in a safe environment where they won't be judged. They can also do it with their guide on the side, the AI. Maybe it's not the AI, maybe it's a teacher, maybe it's a character we've created like our Kitsune. But and in QuestSim, you know, it's Lady QuestSim who's our guide on the side. We have a very important job that we need to balance. We need to make sure that the education that we are providing is going to be effective, that it's relevant, that it's safe. And all of these things are incredibly important to think about as we move forward in this world that we've now kind of opened up, this can of worms that's now there. How do we manage it? And I do leave that management of AI and the efficacies involved in that to the important people doing that work at the moment. And of course, strengthening teachers and what they know and how they are able to work with what you see. There's a lot of teachers who have been doing this job for a long, long time and are experts at what they do, and maybe don't use AI. I was reading a recent article that was saying exactly that. Our students use AI. Our teachers maybe don't use AI. What does that mean? And does that change the face of the digital divide? Does that change how they communicate with each other? And it's something we need to address. Speaking about the digital divide, making sure that every student can get this content wherever they are is a tall order, especially as we discovered in COVID, when there's a lot of children who actually don't even have access to the internet in their houses. And then when we start talking about worldwide, how do we get this information? How do we enable this content delivery to people in Africa, to students in India, to how do we do this? And I know that Microsoft is doing some very important work with the digital public infrastructure. And I'm hoping that, especially in America, as we're talking about America now, finding ways to ensure that every child in America has access to AI, the internet, and our games is important to me. So figuring out a way that that delivery system works. Again, the policy ideas I referenced, the World Economic Forum is doing a lot of work on this. I think all of these ideas are incredibly important to consider as we move forward in this work. This is Spark NC. This is the company that we've been working with in North Carolina. They are in 16 districts in North Carolina, and our game is with them. And our students, their students are accessing our game through the Spark NC labs. And we want to do more of this. We want to, as I said, be in the hands of every single student in America. And we want to strengthen the teachers and help them feel enabled and empowered by what is happening. And ultimately, as Mark said right at the very beginning, this is all about the kids. We want the kids to be happy and safe and excited and inspired and learning. And so we need to work together to get to that point. Thank you. And I would love to hear questions.
Linda,
Question, I'm
thank
hoping.
you. Well, great. That was a good overview of the category that you're helping, build, right, for young people. That's great. I saw quite a few posts from Doug Hoolan. So Doug, why don't you jump in with your top most salient comment, because you're prolific, my friend.
Yeah, well, Linda, great presentation. I'm looking forward
Thank
to looking at your material. I'm very interested in connecting the unconnected. I worked at Motorola and Nokia for 33 years. There's 1.3 billion students, K through 12, and a lot of them don't have, 2/3 don't have access to the internet at home. So the question is, how can we connect the unconnected? The other thing is how to give, encourage students to be lifelong learners, so that they experience the wonder and joy of learning and realize that they're constantly going to have to keep learning. It's not just a one-time thing. So, your tools look very promising, and looking forward to promoting what you're doing.
Thank you. I'm going to supply you with links after this so that you can go in and try. And the same, we'd love people to go in and play them and, have your grandchildren, have your children play them. And we'd love to hear from you. And yes, I'd like you to spread the word.
Outstanding, Doug. And I noticed that your first post was, hey, this is great, but 2/3 of the world's children don't have access to the internet. So
At
we
home,
have,
yeah.
That ties right back to PCI's mission, which is we need to give more of the young people around the planet digital access, right?
Yes.
So that, that
Human
there's
rights.
digital equity.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So excellent. I MetaV's iPad 2 is actually Richard Boyd, right?
Yes.
All right, I've got
who is the CEO of the company that Richard is, heads, that Linda is part of. And so, Richard, you're putting some comments in. You have, you put in a lot of thought every day into this space. So jump in. What are you thinking?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I'm sorry, I'm on my backup iPad because I've had some other issues here. I just got back from DC and left all of my power cords in somewhere in DC, so I'm having difficulty today. So just to show about difficulty of connection. But I thought, and Ben, to your, one of your questions about architecture, I can hopefully answer that in one fell swoop. But the genesis of all of this was a meeting in 2010. And Mark, I'm trying to remember if you were there as well, but we had this Games for Learning conference. It was initiated by Arnie Duncan, who was Secretary of Education at the time. Jim Shelton was there. Alan Kay, who we had on the talk here recently. Mitch Resnick from MIT, Sesame Street. There was about 40 of us in a room. Ben Sawyer was there. Mark, I know you know him. And we were talking about an ARPA for education. And, there were a lot of things that we talked about and how we wanted to get funding to create that. I hope that will still happen, maybe in this next administration. Let's, fingers crossed. But doing more R&D to try to figure out how we deal with these access issues and how do we educate in the 21st century, in the information age, in the simulation century, as we say. But one of the components of that, of course, in the Games for Learning conference was that we know the evidence was in. There's no more debate about well-designed, game education titles improve outcomes. And we had a couple of presentations there that showed like 2 Sigma. We talked about artificial AI sort of tutors as well. I think Fletcher, can't remember Fletcher's last name, but the guy from DARPA was there talking about the evidence that was in around AI tutors. And of course, that always creates a lot of concern and consternation among educators. So we try not to talk about it too much. But AI is here again, like Linda said, whether we like it or not. But the sort of truth that we hold self-evident now is that if you want to learn almost anything, whether it's flying an airplane or motorcycle maintenance or algebra or principles of geometry or whatever, if you can put children, humans in a safe practice environment and let them either alone or together with others, ideally, let them practice in a safe practice environment, you get a shorter path to mastery. We've proven this across everything from surgery to long haul trucking to running a McDonald's restaurant to learning algebra, all that stuff, all that evidence is in. The issue, as Doug points out, and as PCI is really focused on, is how do we increase that access so we can bring this powerful capability to a lot of people? Mark, I agree, over-reliance on AI is not the key. It's like any other tool. It's how do we have the right measure, the right amount of each of these things to actually achieve our goal. Kevin, you know that years ago, I did this big project with the UK Ministry of Defense, and these were adults, not children, but the lesson I learned there is, we were given the raw recruits. We had to produce fighter pilots, helicopter pilots, people that work with sonar and radar and weapon systems aboard these aircraft. The UK gave us at Lockheed the entire problem. We had to produce a qualified candidate, and we didn't get paid until we produced that candidate. So it wasn't about seat time. It wasn't about how many simulators can we sell or any of that stuff. So it really refined and aligned our incentives around what's the shortest path. So the answer was not all games, all simulation, anything like that. It was who has the best simulator, but also how much time for each function should be spent in classroom instruction, how much time in multimedia instruction, how much time with in a classroom, how much time in self-study, how much time with a simulator, and how much time with a real aircraft yields that shorter path. And by doing that, we actually compress the amount of time it used to take by a third or more. And we've always been thinking since then about like what's the right dialing in for algebra, for geometry, for whatever it is, or just generally speaking, as Mark Prensky said, how do we create those empowered individuals who are going to become the architects of the future? What's the right combination of things that are going to achieve that? AI is a new function that we have. Can't ignore it, as Linda pointed out. It is a component, but if you could have, Pythagoras and AI Pythagoras in your world as you're learning the skills of the Pythagorean theorem or other math functions, and you can actually walk up and talk to Pythagoras, and Pythagoras will talk to you and like in the Young Ladies Illustrated Primer, actually adapt to you and try to help you on your learning pathway. We're almost irresponsible not to use it, but responsible use of it is important. So I'll just stop and I'll take any reactions to all that stuff I just spewed.
Well, we'll start with Ben, all right, who was next on our hit parade. Ben, you had quite a few comments. You want to react to what Richard was saying and, add your own thoughts about what you saw today from Linda.
I love the idea of having an ARPA for education and raising their challenges for what we're doing. But part of my concern is we start by, as those of you that have heard me before, we spend too much time trying to fix the 20th century. And if our start if our start is about trying to augment and adjust, we start by augmenting and adjusting the current mechanisms, pedagogy and practice. We're doomed to fail if we don't start with visions of what that future might be in 2030 or beyond. And take a day in the life of a child, a day in the life of a teacher in those periods, and several of those things in that and we can do so in the simulated form. I've spent a lot of time. I am virtual world OG. I spent a lot of time in these totally immersive spaces, and I, as I mentioned, I still have my island in Second Life that I built in 2007 is still operative because I brought President Carter in, and by taking him there, he was the first president in virtual worlds. So I
Wow.
put signage up, and then I stopped paying my rent, and they never got rid of my island, so it's still there. That's another lesson for you
That's
going
awesome.
forward. But the point is that it's so, when it's experiential and an accomplishment, as Mark talks about, it is much more ingrained in their pattern going forward and their exposure. I spend a lot of time with my students right now, starting with the fact that how you think is more important than what you know, and how you respond and experience is more important than knowing something. You do have to know things, but they're contextual, and that's where your encounter with Pythagoras, your encounter with Aristotle, are experiential elements that inform your thinking. But the takeaway is the thinking, not the knowing, and it is so much richer opportunity, akin to their life form activity, which is about accumulating experiences. One of the nice things about this generation is a focus on accumulating experiences, and we don't offer a rich enough portfolio that is very expedient to do it this way as well.
Yeah.
I have
So
more things, but I'll shut up at this. Good. Go ahead, Linda.
I would say that first of all, I love the idea of President Carter being in second life. I think it's incredible. Oh my gosh. So just answering some of the other things that you were talking about, I think that it's important to also think about how the evolution of other things has happened over time, right? We're holding on to this idea of what we have and saying it's brilliant, it's perfect. Let's keep. We want our children to still have, all of these amazing things they have, and this new situation of AI is going to corrupt this. And as I think Ben, who is it that Doug maybe that said it's going to be a crutch maybe for them. I think that Doug, with all respect, you need to wake up, because students have been doing this sort
You've
of
been
thing.
telling that to him for years.
Students have been using crutches for as long as we've had students. It's just the new flavor of crutch. And I mean, as a teacher, I've known about Cliff Notes for a very long time. The only difference now is that it's becoming just a lot more efficient. And then I don't think we're going to have to worry about whether or not we're adding or fixing an old world problem to try and renovate it for our new situation. I believe that AI has rendered that an impossibility. And I go back to two examples. My first example is the 5-paragraph essay. So in all good schools, you teach students how to do a 5-paragraph essay, preferably by the end of 5th grade. How important do you think that is now? Last year, that was extremely important. It is important for students to be able to process information, have it in a way that they can actually talk about what they've understood, know what they understand, and then communicate that information. Yes, it's very important. The 5-paragraph essay, though, is something that AI can do now very quickly. And every student is going home and going, hey, ChatGPT, write me this essay.
Our accreditation practices are the clawback right now and the barrier too. So I I agree with you, but we must dismiss and and spawn away the accreditation engines that are holding back the patterns of innovation.
Yes.
They might have license in your ARPA for education. By
Yeah.
the way,
Fluency.
one last quick comment is it was President Carter that had his chief of staff call me to bring my computer over because he wanted to know about virtual
Amazing.
worlds.
Oh, that's
It wasn't
incredible.
joint.
He was a
Wow.
Renaissance man. Is
Two,
What an amazing
2008.
thing.
That's right.
That was
Yes.
2008, by the way.
Wow.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Yeah, one comment about the crutch. Actually, that was Socrates, AI Socrates, that was having a discussion with AI Bill Gates on, will this enhance learning or will it be a crutch, right? And learning. I'm a big believer in critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
And a lifelong learner, how to learn. That you have an enjoyment of learning. And if all you're doing is getting the AI to regurgitate the answer, that's not very helpful.
No.
But if it's collaborating with the AI to learn more, I think that's so much better.
And
So
that's where that total revolution of education has to come in, because we have to, as teachers now, change that assignment, because we can't know for sure that they've written it.
yeah.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Mark Prensky, your hand is up and you are on camera.
Hi, everybody. Linda, that was great.
Thanks, Mark.
And what I really liked about it is that it was addressing the teacher market, and it was speaking right to the teachers. And all it did for me was show me how many decades I've been in advance of of all this stuff. And because I was saying this, 20, 30 years ago, but
We've
now
read all your stuff.
and now we're getting here, and this is great. But the point is that we are not thinking. I love that comment about Ben's comment about fixing the 20th century, because
Yep.
that was what we have now is what we needed 20 years ago. And now he's absolutely right. We'd better start thinking 20 years in the future and building some of the things that we need, because it's not that the reason we taught the 5 paragraph essay is because that's a good way. If you can tell one, just say one out loud, it's a good way to convince people, right? Here's what I want to do. Here's some information. Here's my conclusion, right? And on all that kind of stuff. So that's not a terrible thing to have young people do, even if they're using AI as part of how they do it. So we are not in my view, I'd love to see us focus more on the outcome that we want the kids to have. And you very rightly said many times, Linda, that we want to give the curriculum better. We want to take the standard. We want to talk to educators in ways that don't scare them to death and say all this stuff is useless and all that kind of stuff. And you're really good at that. And I would even start my presentation with your credentials, and I am a reformed school teacher. I mean, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous, right? That's really what you are. And I remember meeting you way back and thinking that person is very traditional. And so and now you are part of the the advanced group that I'm very happy you're part of. And so you're the most important person in this whole thing, because you're the bridge. You're the person who knows the old, who speaks the old, and that's why I thought you did a great job. I thought you really were doing very well to convince the people who see what the world in the very traditional, as Ben says, 20th century sense. And that's what we need to do with kids. And that's, who kids were back then. And the picture that got to me the most was the picture of the kids, sitting there, the young kids, when you showed a couple of kids. And I, the interesting thing that I used to see pictures like that, and we used them to say kids are bored. But that's not what I saw in those kids. They're frustrated.
Yes.
They're not bored. They're frustrated. And I think that from the kids' point of view, what they're saying is, holy shit, I live in this new world. I live with all these tools. I live with all these things. I have all this stuff. And that's all I want to use. Why am I not using that stuff to do whatever it is that I need to do? And my perspective for 20 years from now is we'd better be looking at what the kids are enthusiastic about and reducing the stress on kids and not pushing a curriculum, whatever the curriculum is. It pained me when I mentioned the word Freud and my kid had no idea of who that was, and I said, holy shit, how could you not know that? But there's going to always be tons of stuff that we thought were important that the kids don't know and don't need to know until they're starting to do something they want to do. And then suddenly stuff becomes relevant. So I'll get off my soapbox but thank you very much for being that bridge. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, and I mean that bridge is important. And yeah, I appreciate everything you said. I'm not I've never really been a traditional educator though, but I'll take it. I'll take it.
I don't think that you've been a traditional educator, but some of the thoughts and maybe even still, and that's not bad. I'm not criticizing here. I'm saying,
Yeah.
That kids need a curriculum, that they need to be sitting
Yeah.
down. There were
Yeah.
two pictures, for example, of the kid looking at the whiteboard, and then the kid looking at this beautiful 3D display, but they were still both kids sitting at desks looking.
Yeah.
That's what they were. And that's the problem. It's kids sitting at desks looking rather than kids out there, experiencing the world and making it better. And
Yeah.
and so I had one thought for QuestSim at the very beginning. Let's call it 4D simulation. Let's think about that there's a time element in this and all this kind of stuff. Let's 3D is so old. Let's move a few, it's like five the Doug
Like
and
that.
the fifth generation and the 5G and all this kind of stuff. Let's move up a few dimensions here.
I like that, Mark.
Yeah, you make it 4D and you can reintroduce stress. Okay.
Ah!
All right. So Suzanne, thank you for being with us. You had some comments in chat. Join us.
Well, Linda, this was terrific. I am so hopeful that you are a non-traditional educational force because I think you're going to revolutionize education.
Oh, thank you.
Really, AR, VR is just going to connect so many of the missing millions and capture students that have challenges with learning. I was one of those. Anyway, this is an opportunity to capture all those kids and move forward, collaborating. Just look at all the partnerships and engagement. I mentioned in the chat about immersive engagement, and those are the two prolific words I could think of as well. That what you're doing is just great. You're on a wave, and just ride it and be non-traditional.
Thank you, Suzanne. I thank you. That means a lot, and it's so nice to hear the excitement in your voice. That's
Awesome.
good. Yeah, yeah.
Outstanding. Thanks, Suzanne. Greatly appreciate it. All right. So we're coming up to the bottom of the hour. We normally go into overtime from the last part of the hour, and we will do that if we continue to have questions. But if not, then I see Brian's hand is up like a Boy Scout. I see Brian Donahue. All right. He is about to take the oath. Brian, how are you, buddy?
Good. I'm gonna be a little different track
All right.
than what we've been talking about. There's an old expression it's an old Irish expression, do as I say, not as I do.
Mm-hmm.
By that, first of all, I've worked full time, but I've taught my entire career. I've taught at night at the graduate, postgraduate level, etc. So, but I don't want to ask my question as a teacher. I want to talk to myself, to you all, as what I am, which is the president of a company that's going to roll out high technology. And the question is, in your comment about the flight simulator,
Mhm.
totally immersive in a safe practice area. I run a group of recent graduates of the UC Berkeley Information School, Masters in Data Science, and we had a 1 hour yesterday, and trying to even get these students to understand advanced technology. Does not your technology apply to grown-ups?
Of
That's my
course.
question.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
would say that that's really where it started, Brian. And I just put a comment in there just to make sure it was clear because someone asked an architecture question. But we were trying, I was at Lockheed Martin, we were trying to help lower the cost and access. The flight simulation was all about going into these heavy breathing, big motion simulators that cost a lot of money. You had to wait in time, and schedule time on it, that kind of thing. And we said, how do we
Right.
bring that down to where it can be a laptop based thing? And how do we go even further and bring this out to, like, I just came from a meeting where we were talking with USAID about like provincial reconstruction teams and folks like that are going out for disaster relief. How do you teach those human skills of going into a different culture? How do you use an interpreter? How do you be respectful of that? The people that you're
Exactly.
reaching and the patterns and stuff of what's happening on the street. So we can create those kinds of simulations, but the game-based stuff, if you're using the Unreal Engine and a lot of these things, it can be quite expensive and difficult to access. You need a special piece of equipment. And if NVIDIA has their way, you got to have their latest NVIDIA chip in there that costs
Yeah, but
$500.
forget about that. Forget about
So
it.
we actually solved this problem for the DoD under a contract from the Pentagon. But then myself and David Smith architected it, and I was at Lockheed. We open sourced it, which almost got me fired from Lockheed. It's like, what the hell are you doing, Boyd? Right? But it is available to everybody. You can go there and look right now. It's in GitHub. You can get all the code. One of the first things we did with it is we made this Mission to Mars game with the NSF grant years ago and showed that, like, on a Chromebook, you can have a 3D immersive experience. And yes, if you have a headset, we also did that. We can make a stereoscopic 3D view of it. So now you're immersed, and now you can do, have these great experiences. It's challenging because you have to think about the fact that you're delivering on a small device and over God knows what kind of bandwidth. But if you think that through, you can do some extraordinary things. And that's what we're trying to do, is make it accessible. And like I said, we have proven over and over that for a whole wide variety of things, if you let someone go in, practice over and over and over through iteration and get comfortable,
No.
they can learn something in a shorter amount of time than a variety of other methods. And it's really just down to, if you tell me about something, I'll remember it for this long. If I watch a video about it or whatever, maybe it's a little bit more. But if I experience it, it tends to be more indelible. And there's a bunch of Stanford studies about even stereoscopic 3D has, another 15% bump on that experiential learning. But if you're going to learn a foreign language or how to change a tire, or like I said, long haul trucking, running a restaurant, all these other things, going through the experience of it will shorten the path to mastery.
I'll just add that, in conversations that we've had in the past, Richard, Linda, this is also the place to experience the failures, right? This is the place to do the Sully Sullenberger stuff and crash the plane, because you want to crash the plane in a simulator environment. You don't want to do it in real life, right? So all the things that are stressors, operate the nuclear submarine, all right, and have the engine not work right, okay, in the sim, not in the real submarine, right?
Right.
Definitely.
I have one closing comment from my end. In my simplistic mind,
Uh-huh.
it all happens between your ears. Now, I see you shaking your head. You understand what I mean. In other words, we experience life, we learn through our mind. So getting to the mind, and now that can be done on a damn laptop. Like this meeting right now, I'm totally engaged in this. My mind is on you. I don't have a $1 million simulator. You
No.
know, sometimes
But
with Ben's jokes, I need a simulator.
But I can give you an example of why this is a different scenario now, better, right?
Okay.
There have been times in history where people have been researching the exact same thing and have spent time and effort and resources researching the exact same thing, only to come to the same conclusions at the same time. And this has been happening all through history, right? We're now at a point where those people can be in collaboration from the beginning. I mean, provided the politics is there, and there are many other human problems that we have to surmount. But the collaboration aspect, that whole piece of being able to stand on the shoulders of information that is already present and know what that information is before you start, that's a different point. Yes, you can absolutely just be on your computer and you could Google it, you could do whatever, right? It's not going to be the same as being able to say, let's meet together. We're going to figure out what we need to do here. Here is our group of people that are going to contribute to this. They don't have to be students. They're definitely, all people should be learning these tools. All people should have access to these tools. But the AI piece is that it can be tailor-made to help you be your best you. So maybe Brian Donahue is excellent at many things, and maybe there's something like, I don't know, I'm just a bit time management or something else, right? You need goal setting or something like that. AI can do that and can keep you on task and can keep your group on task and can make sure that you are meeting different criterion as you go along. So it's definitely an augmentative thing, but it's also ensuring that as a group, you're making sure that you're taking advantage of all current information.
Okay, I need to just interject. We're at the bottom of the hour, so for those of you who joined and have to depart, we want to thank you for being part of this episode of PCI and our community forum. And now we're at overtime, so we're going to go and spend a little bit more time with those of you who want to stay with us. Richard, you are first in overtime.
Brian, I was nodding my head to what you were saying because I absolutely agree that integration, that synthesis of, Linda had a thing that said synthesis on one of our slides.
Yeah.
Synthesis is most robust when you're bringing a lot of media together. And the benefit of this medium, and that's really all it is, this gaming medium we're using, even if it is just on a 2D screen, as you were saying, the benefit is you're using every media type ever used before in human communication. You're synthesizing sound, audio, video, 3D characters, and maybe even other actual humans, like in your Second Life examples, in that world together where we're problem solving together. And that's where that shorter path actually comes from it doesn't have to be stereoscopic 3D,
right?
But having that learning by doing, because I can read about something, and yes, even when I'm reading a book, I'm, here's my copy of the Iliad and the Odyssey right here, and I've read this, and I'm synthesizing, I'm making the imagery in my head. The virtual reality is in my head as I'm reading it, but how much of that will I recall? The next thing is I can watch the movie about the Odyssey, and how much of that will stay? Well, that is reading this book is a more active experience than sitting back and watching a movie, because now I'm really in passive mode. And we've done studies on this, where you put the EKG stuff on, and you actually measure the brain waves and everything. When you're watching TV or you're watching a movie, even much less of your brain is engaged than if you're doing something project-based physically in the world, or if you're in a game world where, hey, we've got to go together and go accomplish a goal together, or just me on my own is
Yeah.
I'm going in and I'm experiencing this, and I'm taking a step with every mouse click to move. More of that is indelibly ingrained in this gray matter, that by doing it as opposed to passively
But
watching it.
add one more level. I've got a company who's going to roll out a product. I want to use your immersive technology to convince customers of the benefits of my technology, is where I'm going.
Yeah, for sure. And we actually have used things like that. So there's an example of a product we made recently for a company that works on dialysis and encouraging encouraging dialysis patients to do home dialysis. So moving them from being going in to get it to being at home to get it, and interviewing those patients and figuring out how we can move that needle and practicing.
So Brian, if you
Right.
want to connect with Linda and Richard, just put your contact information in chat, my friend. And let me get Mark Prinsky.
Thank you for your time, folks.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Brian.
exciting, Brian. Thank you.
I'd like to follow up with you guys.
All right,
Great.
do it. Mark Prinsky, your hand is back up.
It is.
Come on in. The water is fine.
It is. Well, I'm learning. I'm learning about long time frames, and I'm learning this with my book. I'm learning that I have these ideas and I want them to happen immediately, and I say, why? That it makes perfect sense, and they don't happen immediately, and it takes 20 years, and it does all these kind of things. So that's really true, but it bothers me when I hear people, and Brian, you know that we don't always think alike, but but it bothers me when we say it all happens in our heads and it all happens between our ears. So a lot of it does, but as we grow and as we extend our capabilities and as we extend essentially the body parts we have, and we have new ways of thinking through AI, we have algorithmic thinking, we have a lot of things, we have collaboration that Linda pointed out so well. As we do this, we become more than what's just between our ears. And in 20 years, we're going to be a whole hell of a lot more than what's just between our ears, even the smartest of us and the most capable of us. We're all going to be really extended in many ways. And that's what I think we have to deal with. At the same time, we have this terrible situation of not growing emotionally very much. We're still the same people. We still think, oh, we're so important and we have to do this stuff. And it's all individual people. And so this gap between how we're growing intellectually and how our powers are growing intellectually, which is so enormous, and how our emotional states are not really growing, and we're still prideful, and we're still greedy, and we're still all these things, and love and empathy and gratitude and optimism are not dominating us. And so that's going to be a real problem. And I think that one of the directions, and if I can bring it into practical terms now, one of the directions that you can think about going is, in a sense, the social emotional direction, which is saying, how do we increase the love, empathy, gratitude, and optimism? How do we decrease the greed, racism, abuse, belligerence, and bullying, the Lego versus the grab that I talk about in my book? How do we do that and help people evolve, not just intellectually in the ways that they are evolving and that we see with the 3D and the tools and the AI and all that stuff? How do we help humans evolve emotionally to keep up?
Mark, for once I'm ahead of you. Imagine this point. Let's quickly make a note. I'm going to show you something quickly. Are we ready?
Sure, go
Goodness
ahead.
me. Maybe I'm
Okay.
going to look.
I've been praying for this moment.
I know. Imagine. Look what we are making.
Okay. Yes. Good. Absolutely.
The empathy
Absolutely.
engine. So what we are now also focusing on is this idea of being able to use AI and our personas that we're creating to help train people in empathy. How do you teach people to be empathetic? And in specific industries. So we're going to look at the healthcare industry, we're going to look at education, we're going to look at the commercial sector, and we're going to look at the defense sector. And how are we going to help prepare these people for the world in which they need to actually have people skills and be able to talk to each other and be empathetic? And now, as you correctly said, this is something that needs to be intentionally taught. And so, yes, I feel like I'm on the same wavelength finally as you, Mark, a
Bravo.
little bit.
Brava.
Congratulations. he said.
Brava.
I might add that we had explored recently, what are the dimensions of AI itself taking on the dimensions of empathy, right? In
Yeah.
addition to being able to teach, and that's kind of touching the edges of current capability, and also manipulating people, right? If it's not used properly. Roland Roost and Minghui Huang have written about that. So if you want to look into paper that has gotten a lot of attention, you might want to look at what Roland Rust at the University of Maryland has been writing. Okay.
Thank you.
Other thoughts, comments, questions? Let me just see. I see Bonita on with us. Bonita, do you have a question for today's call? We'd be delighted to have you join us and ask something.
Well, I am. I'm very interested in this empathy exercise, since my own work has to do with distinguishing the mindset of more relational thinking people, which is more the we thinking, and the competencies that have been invisible, unacknowledged, and unrewarded, like being a fire preventer rather than a firefighter, being an angel's advocate rather than a devil's advocate, being a both and thinking instead of either or thinking. So I'd be very interested in pursuing this with you.
Excellent. I'd love to talk to you further about this. Yes, let's figure this out.
Okay, great. And interestingly enough, I just had a conversation I'm at Santa Clara University, and I teach gendered engineering there. This whole idea of understanding different mindsets for collaboration. And I just had a conversation with a graduate student who's doing robotics collaboration about bringing this into his project. So it would be very interesting to be able to work with you.
Yeah,
did you just say gender engineering?
Gender and engineering, not gender
okay.
engineering.
Oh, okay. I didn't catch the and.
I know a lot of people don't. A lot of people don't. That's why.
And I think that's
Interesting,
actually gender engineering is also very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is.
So I have a comment that I can make about gender and engineering. So my first degree is actually chemical engineering, and I did that degree in Cape Town in 2004, and there were 2 girls in my engineering faculty. I mean, in the whole group, there were 2 girls in the 4 years of people. So it was me and this other lovely girl called Clemmy, and we soldiered through. But yes, thank you for your work.
Well,
Thanks, Bonita.
it was Carol Bartz, who was head of high and Sun Microsystems, where I did my original research, who said that she told me what she brought to the executive team was an ability to see all the different ramifications of a given issue and prevent fires. And for this, she was considered to be not a team player. Obviously, she was getting into other people's turfs and coming up with complex solutions that would take more time, and generally just not doing things the way people do things. And that was right there. Oh, fire preventer. That was my first hanging on to a different competency that I could identify and giving language to it. So I'll be in touch. Okay?
Thank you, Benita. I look forward to it.
Benita, you might be interested to know that I once danced on a table in Paris with Carol Bartz.
Now that's impressive. Okay.
That
You
is
got my vote.
impressive.
There you
So
go.
forget about everything else but the table with Carol.
So Mark,
Hey,
Mark,
we
I was
watched
really
a movie
intrigued
about
by-
Ruth Bader Ginsburg last night called something about the sex. It's on Netflix. It's wonderful. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Wow.
I'll watch
check
it.
that out. So Mark,
mean
you had an
sex with
interesting
whom?
comment where you
Yeah.
said, why do we think manipulating people is bad? I thought that was an interesting comment. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just hearing this and thinking this now. I've been thinking it for a while. Manipulation has a very bad term. It's like saying eugenics. It's like saying a lot of things that have gotten a very bad rap. These days, it's like saying young person, but they've gotten a very bad rap. But the point is that every conversation we have, every interaction we have is an attempt to get somebody to see our point of view and to think in the ways that we're thinking, or to at least amend their thinking in the ways. So manipulation is what we do. It's who we are. It's really, and we have to maybe distinguish good manipulation with bad, and countrywide manipulation or ism-wide manipulation from other things. But the fact that we put down manipulation, I think, is just ignoring who we are.
If you look in the dictionary, what you're going to discover is that there's a range of words that are related to each other. Persuasion, influence, manipulation. And manipulation happens to be the more pejorative of those
Whoa.
range of
Good
what?
word.
Pejorative.
So
Or competing narratives,
yeah,
right?
so I'm just saying that, there's, Mark, that you're absolutely right that that's something that we do. All right.
But not all of us. Not all
well,
of
no,
us.
yeah,
Not
well,
all the
Oh,
time.
Kai, of course, all of us. You just attempted to manipulate us
in
with your whole presentation, Linda.
oh, just a second, before there's a book in my which is cute. It's got a cute title. It's like Life's a Pitch and Then You Buy. Okay, which is it's a book on how to sell. Not every conversation is constructed right in this way. And so there are typologies of interaction with other humans, right? And some of them are informational, and some of them are persuasive, and some of them are otherwise. I used to, I'll just finish with this. I used to say, what kind of meeting is this? Is this an information meeting or a decision meeting, right? Because you want to know, are you trying to, just give me the facts, or are we trying to come to a conclusion? And in the decision meetings, a lot more persuasion is present. It's a different typology of meeting. So back to Richard and then Bonita. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, that idea, like, whether we use manipulation or we go to the other direction, so like, positive persuasion, depends on what the goal is. So on one of the previous PCI talks, I talked about the method used to convince people to buy kale. If any of you remember that nobody was eating kale, and they used a manipulation persuasion methodology to create a market for kale that did not exist. And it happened in about a 4-year period, and now kale is everywhere. And so you can call that like, well, that's sort of a benevolent persuasion, or smoking cessation, or losing weight, or any of those things are positive things. But I'll use this as a thing to say we're about to announce a partnership with Real Spy Comics. You can go look at their website. This guy who wrote this to me, it says, "From Russia with love from Janusz." He's a KGB FSB defector who's now, he wants to tell his story, and he wants to use a medium like this, a gaming medium, to help tell it. He's doing it with comics right now, which I think is really interesting. But I mean, these guys, that's what they do. And I was sitting in a room with people from Intel community, people from Australia, from the UK, from obviously formerly from Russia. He's now on our side, I hope. All right. But they talked about like the need and the necessity of going in and convincing people to cooperate in one direction or the other. And the skills that they use are, when they talk about the skills, it's extraordinary. But all I could think the whole time is like, how do we enlist those sorts of things in the in the service of benevolent outcomes, like being a more, a better citizen, a better caretaker of the planet, being nicer to other people, and things like eating kale and not smoking and stuff like that.
Okay, Bonita, over to you.
No, I'm not going to say anything more. I have to get off, but I'll look forward to working with Linda. I'll just say one more thing, that I use the distinctions of the individualistic mindset and the relational mindset. And clearly the individualistic is the traditional American, business, I-centered way
Sure.
of seeing things and speaking. And so Mark, I appreciate that you see it, that everyone's that way, but I want to just
Yeah, well, you haven't,
way.
he hasn't been in a, well, he's married to somebody from Japan who would understand Nemawashi and needing to gain consensus, all right, for a decision. So I think he's got a both and, all right, in his life, Bonita.
Thank you.
So
Well, most of us do.
Yeah,
But
I
I'd
mean,
love to,
but the I-we
discuss more
comparison-
about what you're saying there. I'd love to discuss that maybe offline somewhere. It's more about what you're saying and how you're seeing the world versus perhaps I'm seeing the world.
Okay, great.
So I would love
Right.
to add a quick comment, Kevin, about
Yeah,
that.
go.
So I see it as when you're talking about manipulation, Mark, I agree to some extent that everyone is trying to manipulate certain things. I do think, though, with my teacher hat on, that we look at these things in two different ways, that there is intrinsic motivation and there's extrinsic motivation. And as a teacher, we're trying to promote intrinsic motivation. It's the difference between a student wanting points or a cookie or a present or something for doing something well, as opposed to just being happy they've done that thing well. And I think if, as students, we can teach people to be intrinsically motivated, so they are pushing themselves based on what they feel is right and what they feel is good in the world, and they are less open necessarily to being manipulated as a consequence of that. However, there is always manipulation in this world. We're faced with TV at the moment that is just one ad after another about, what's happening. And it's just, yes, it's crazy. And people need to know how to navigate that as well.
And I would counter that the words you use, which are good words, promote and teach, are also synonyms for manipulation. They're also synonyms for manipulate. In other words, you want your students to come out a different way than they went in. And so that is a form of manipulation. I'm not saying it's not benign, it's not good, it's not all this. It is all about teaching and promoting and all these things.
Well,
And
So we're all-
we're going to add transformation into that, and then I have to go.
So
Bye.
we're gonna go into the end now because we're at the top of the hour. I see, that this is sparking a lot of, thinking, but we're out of time. So let's get your closing comments, Linda. What do you want us to take away from today? And if you've got more that you want to talk about, you can put that in the chat as we wrap up today. Linda, over to you.
Wow, thank you for this opportunity. And what an
Sure.
incredible group of people, and what an amazing experience and conversation. And I wish we could do this for hours more. Big takeaways from what I would love you guys to be thinking about after this is, how do we inspire our students to want to learn, to want to be in school, and to want to engage themselves to progress into higher thoughts and higher thought patterns? And how do we get to a point where we're enabling them to live in a world that we don't yet know what it's going to look like? And I think somebody hit it on the head when they said it's all about the skills. It's all about what we're letting them leave school with. And I say letting them because really we have them for a certain amount of time every day, right? And it's about what can we nurture within that time frame, and it's got to be about the skills that they leave with. And those skills have to be a toolbox that lets them understand and enables them to function in a world that we do not yet understand.
Okay, excellent. And with that, I want to thank you for being our guest today and sharing what QuestSim is up to. It sounds like you have some people who are interested, and so interested that they're going to be following up with you, with Richard. So we're delighted, and we will have this recording available from our friend Schneider Alfonso, who was actually my co-host today. Schneider, thank you so much for being technical support in background. You're a good man. And with everything you folks do, be intentional. We will be back with our next episode of PCI Community Forum in 2 weeks. Take care and
Thank you, everyone.
be well.
Thank you
Cheers.
very
Thank you.
much.
Thanks.
Everybody.